Well, hey, I'm Matt. If you don't know me yet, I am the associate pastor here at the Grove, former recovering junior high pastor. I was the junior high pastor here for 12 years. I was many of your junior high pastor. So that's where you know me from. If you're like, I know that guy. Where have I seen that? That's where. Excited to talk while Byron is speaking in Big Church today, but we are continuing this Words of Easter series. I believe that he started last week, or maybe I'm starting it, I'm not sure. But this is the Words of Easter, figuring out what is Easter all about as we lead up to Easter here in a couple weeks. So as I always do, I like to start with a story about my kids. I have 3 kids, 3 daughters, and my youngest one is 4. Her name is Ellie. Ellie we call her boss baby because she's like, thinks she's in charge. And she likes to boss us around, and it's a problem, and hopefully we get it figured out before she reaches school age, because that's gonna be a rude awakening for her. But she loves to play follow the leader, right? That's her favorite game right now. But there's one catch: she has to be the leader. She doesn't follow, she leads, that's it. And when you're leading, or when she's leading and you're following, you're constantly doing it wrong. Right? So she's like, follow me, daddy. And then she turned to, no, you're not doing it right. I'm like, how do you know? You're walking, I'm following you. And so it's a problem. She's constantly correcting me and working on that. Do you know anybody like that in high school form, right? People that are a little bit like trying to tell you what to do all the time. That can get annoying. All right, how many of you guys drive? Raise your hand. Maybe you have a car, or you drive, you have your license, or a permit. That works because you drive if you have a permit. So here's the thing, right? Have you ever had to follow other cars in going somewhere? Either you're going to a restaurant that you've never been to before, you're going to a different location, and you have to follow them, right? You kind of know where you're going, but you're like, I'll just follow you, it's cool. And then they go like 100 miles an hour and you lose them, and you're like, what? Where'd they go? Like, that's the worst. So picture that scenario. Would you rather be the lead car? Raise your hand. You'd rather lead, that's you, okay. Who wants to be like the car right behind the leader? That's me. I want to be right behind the leader, because any further back, I don't trust those guys in front of me. We could get lost, that's not good. Who prefers to be the last car in the caravan? That would be you. You're like, I'll get there when I get there. Nobody, huh? Okay, like 5 of you voted, so thank you for that, that was good. But anyway, so this is a scenario you will probably get more and more as you go get older. Probably by the time you guys hit college, it'll be a weekly occurrence. You're caravanning somewhere with friends, right? That's how you do it, right? So when I was in high school, let me take you back, the summer of 2000. Many of you were, none of you were born. That's fine. Don't tell me how old I am. I don't want to know. But I was in high school. I was the summer between junior and senior year of high school. I was 16 years old. Not yet 17. I turned 17 a week into my senior year of high school. That was kind of rough. Another story for another day. So I was playing baseball, and I was on this American Legion summer baseball team, and this is how old I am. They would have us all just, hey, all the players who can drive will bring their car. You just get in with one of the other players and you caravan. So I was one of the few players who had their driver's license. So I was one of the cars. I had a 1992 red Chevy Cavalier, okay? And back in the day, you would see 10 of these every time you would drive anywhere. They were everywhere. They were like the most popular car on the road. Now you've never seen one. You don't even know what that is. That's fine. So it's this tiny little car. And so imagine, I just got my driver's license a week before the season started. Like, no joke. And I would have 3 or 4 other baseball players shove into my little 92 Chevy Cavalier, right? And we're stuffed in there. And these guys would all fight over what CD to put in the CD player and stuff like that. And the coaches would say, all right, follow us. And they would just go. And we would go, I lived in Nebraska at the time. So they would usually be going down a 1-lane country Nebraska road. And we would drive for 45 minutes usually to get to our game. So we're driving to our game. And so this probably 3 weeks into the season, we had a new player. And he was like really cool. He had an earring, right? Just to give you the level of cool he was. His name was Phil, and he was a really good pitcher. But so Phil came in, and he was like Phil was kind of a rich kid. We could all just tell he had that vibe, right? And Phil had this brand new purple Isuzu Amigo. Like, check this thing out. We have it on the screen for you, I think. This car was like, kind of like a Jeep, but kind of like an SUV, but tiny, right? A little hatchback, you see that thing? Yeah, and brand new. It was a really cool car, I'm not gonna lie. This looks really old, but this isn't Phil's actual car. It was a car like this. And he had it was tricked out. He had tricked out wheels. He had all the bells and whistles in this thing, and he was really proud of it. So Phil could drive, so naturally everyone wanted to ride with Phil in the really cool purple Amigo. And so we get going to this baseball game. I'm like the third or fourth car. Phil is right in front of me. So my job is to follow Phil. Well, Phil, we're probably halfway to our destination. And the way they did it is one coach would be the lead car and one coach would be the last car, right? And all the player cars were in between. We were driving, Phil starts swerving. And I'm watching him, he's right in front of me. And remember, it's one lane going this way, one lane going this way, that's it. Nobody else on this road. Phil swerves into the oncoming lane, swerves into his lane, swerves back. He's doing that for 2 minutes. Then all of a sudden he swerves all the way off the road and goes careening into a ditch and then just stops. And I just keep going. I'm like, I don't want to follow Phil. It's bye, Phil. I didn't stop. I'm going to the game. And Phil got in big trouble. Phil didn't play for a few games after that, and Phil didn't drive again after that. But I think the lesson in this is sometimes it can be really hard to follow somebody else. For many reasons. Maybe you don't trust them. Maybe you're not sure where they're going. You don't know if they know where they're going, right? Many reasons. But here's the thing. In this life, to be a good leader, which I think we all should be aspiring to be a leader one day or currently, you have to first be a good follower. And being a good follower involves trusting and obeying, right? And so ultimately, if we call ourselves Christians, and I think many of us do, to break down that word Christian, a Christian is a Christ follower. And so to be a good Christian, we need to follow Christ. And so following is an important part of what we're called to do. All right, so we're gonna dive right into our text today. If you got a Bible, open up to Mark chapter 1. If you don't have a Bible, it'll be on the screen here. But Mark is this book that, of all of the Gospels, Mark is the most fast-paced, okay? It has the fewest chapters, but it just goes boom, 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 one story, one miracle, one situation into the next. And so if you've never really read the Bible and you want to learn more about Jesus' life, Mark gives you a really quick snapshot of Jesus' life one after another. So when we dive into this, this is the time when Jesus is gonna call his first followers to come and be his disciples. So this is Mark chapter 1, verse 15. Let's go ahead and put it on the screen and read from here. The time is fulfilled and the kingdom of God is at hand. Repent and believe in the gospel. So this is the moment right here. The decisive moment, the appointed time where Jesus' ministry was about to happen. This is kind of one of the pinnacles of our story in human history, of God sending his son, right? To show a way from death to salvation, right? And it's through him. And so this is a big moment, a critical moment. It's a fulfillment of God's kingdom being on earth, and this is important. And so he needed some people around him, right? He wanted a group of guys. He wanted a posse. He wanted a band, right? He wanted some followers that he would train up. He would show the way so that they could then take the good news of Jesus Christ to the world. They would be the people that would send it to the next generation. So this is important. Who would you pick? If you knew you had to pick some people to be your followers who would then be the leaders, one day, take over. They say in the business world or in any job you have, the best way to be good at your job is you're constantly thinking of who am I gonna train up to eventually take my job when I get a higher job, right? And so in a way, Jesus was kind of doing that with his disciples. Maybe you would go for the most, the best soldiers. Maybe that would be your thing. Maybe athletic. That's what you would look for in a good disciple. Maybe eloquent speaker. Maybe that would be a quality you would look for in a disciple, a follower. Maybe good teachers, maybe just good morals, a good education, something like that. No, Jesus went for fishermen. Fishermen. If you and I were building like a list of in first generation Israel, who we would want to be our followers, maybe fishermen wouldn't be at the top of your list. They're your blue collar workers. They're not educated. They're not necessarily smart. They definitely don't smell well if they're spending their time on a boat with fish, right? But that's who Jesus goes after. That's who he chose to call, to be his followers. So let's keep reading. 16, Mark 1:16. Passing alongside the Sea of Galilee, he saw Simon and Andrew, the brother of Simon, casting a net into the sea, for they were fishermen. And Jesus said to them, "Follow me, and I will make you become fishers of men." And immediately they left their nets and followed him. And going on a little further, he saw James, the son of Zebedee, and John, his brother, who were in their boat mending the nets. And immediately he called them, and they left their father Zebedee in the boat with the hired servants and followed him. Okay, so here you have two different groups of his disciples that he's calling. They're both fishermen. They're both currently working. They're doing their job. They're maybe on the boats. It didn't necessarily tell us if where they were exactly. It looks like Simon and Andrew were actually out there in the sea, and John and James were with their father in the boat. Maybe they were out to sea too, we don't know. So this word follow, the Greek word for follow is akouloutheo. It occurs 90 times in the New Testament. Excuse me. 79 times of those occurrences, it happens in the Gospels, which means this word follow is a word Jesus used a lot. It was an important word. It was kind of focused on Jesus. And then Jesus tells them, hey, follow me. I will make you fishers of men. I've always found that to be such a weird sell, right? It's like, hey, follow me. Guess what? You get to fish for people. I'm like, that sounds barbaric. It's like, what does that even mean? And it wouldn't have been that unusual of a statement for them because they probably were familiar with that phrase, fishing for people, because it was used in the Old Testament a lot, but it was kind of a negative connotation. It was about judgment, right? Fishing for people was kind of like condemning those people who weren't following God. But Jesus is using it positively, as in, hey, if you follow me, you will fish for people. In other words, you will be my active guides that will help bring salvation to those that need it. He used it as a really positive thing. But also, they're fishermen. So they get fishing. They understand that, hey, this is how we make a living. We go, we do our job, we cast our nets. Hopefully we have a good bunch of fish we bring in, we sell, we make money. And so he's like, yeah, you know how you're doing that and that's your life? You're gonna do that, but you're gonna collect disciples for me, to follow me. It's a good thing, and you're gonna bring salvation to that world. I think, again, like, he didn't sit there and teach them and preach to them and convince them he was a good guy to follow. He just said, hey, you guys, wanna follow me? That was it. Like, end of interaction. It wasn't, they didn't have any time to like call his references and vet him a little bit, do a background check, at least like Instagram stalk him a little bit to see if he was posting some weird photos. No, they didn't have any of that time. They were just like, okay, let's follow you, man, let's go. So why? Is part of it that they were fishermen? They were just kind of, no one really picked them. Nobody really said, hey, you guys, I could see a future in you being part of my enterprise. Come follow me. They probably didn't get that very often. That was probably not a common occurrence for them. But I think deeper than that, Jesus spoke with authority. Jesus spoke with this there's something about him. He knows what he's talking about. I want to know more. I want to learn more. I want to follow him. I want to be like him. And that's how Jesus had them convinced to follow him. They literally dropped everything to follow him. Imagine that, right? So they were called. And we use this phrase a little bit in the Christian world, right? What's God calling you to? And I think we all have a call. And picture a phone, right? It's like if someone calls you, you have to answer the call or else you didn't get the call, right? It went to voicemail and then you have anxiety about calling that person back and you wait 4 or 5 days, then you finally do, right? That's how calls work today. But if you're called, that's awesome, but you gotta answer the call. And so I think we all as believers are called to something specific and something general. We have a general call and a specific call on all of our lives. So our general call is that we're all called to follow Jesus, right? That's called being a disciple. We're all called to follow him, to know his word, to live it out, to share it with other people, to tell others about Jesus. But then we also have a specific call. What that is between you and God. And I think a lot of our Christian life is trying to figure that out. What is God calling me to? Now, that in itself can be micro and macro, right? Specifically, right now, God's calling me to speak to you guys. But when I'm done, that call's over. Then I'll be waiting for the next call. But there's more of a bigger picture call that I feel God has on my life, and that's to care for people. That's to care about the hurting people in our midst. That is my bigger specific call that God has on my life. What's yours? Now, I don't think you're gonna know what the specific call is unless you're going for the general call. You have to follow him to hear that specific call in your life. And so I think following Jesus entails 3 specific things. These are kind of our main points today, right? Following Jesus means first, you have to be attached to Jesus, okay? Not like physically attached to him, but you have to really want to be around him. You want to feel some kind of a chemistry with him. You want to be attached to him. You want to know more about him. You need to love him. And so in our passage, right, Jesus says, hey, follow me. I will make you become fishers of men. After that was proposed to them, they had to decide if they wanted to follow, if they wanted to attach themselves to the Jesus boat. You know what I mean? All right, this guy sounds like he's a teacher. He sounds like he's from God. Let's follow him. Would they believe that Jesus' plan for their life was a good plan? They had to decide that. And all of these points I'm about to tell you are all about control. And following, what prevents us from following Jesus is usually our control issues. I don't want to follow him. I want to follow myself. But here's the thing, we all follow somebody. You guys are following different trends you see on the internet. You're following your friends. You're dressing a certain way because someone else did it first, most of us, right? And so it's we're naturally followers. But who are we attaching ourselves to follow with our lives? These guys had to decide in that moment, will I attach myself to Jesus or will I not? You have to decide that. Will you attach yourself to Jesus or will you not? It's not always the most popular decision. So the second one, the second thing to do when following Jesus, it entails surrendering to his call. Like I said, you can be called to do something, but you can miss the call if you're not listening, or if you're too busy doing something else, or if you just choose not to. So in both of these little mini examples, verse 18, and immediately they left their nets. And immediately he called them and they left their father Zebedee in the boat. Like they had to surrender, and the surrender involved them stopping what they were doing immediately, right? If I told you, hey, like, you know, you've already had a donut, but you see that other donut, you really want that donut, you know you shouldn't have that donut, you know you could do without that donut, you see it, right? There's a level where you gotta say, no, I'm not gonna take the donut. But then you gotta leave or you're gonna just wander back to the donut, right? So you have to immediately turn away from it, you know? So part of surrendering means letting go of that desire instantly to grab that thing we shouldn't be doing. They immediately left what they were doing. They dropped their nets. He even left their dad in the boat, which is such a funny picture to me. Like their dad's sitting there with his arms up. What are you guys doing? Where are you going? And like, were they out to sea? Did they just dive into the water and start swimming? Probably. That's what I think. Surrender's about letting go. It's about letting go of the control and the will that we hold so violently sometimes too in our lives. So attachment to Jesus, surrender to his call, and third, accept his leadership. So the first part said, immediately they left their nets. Okay, that's good, they surrendered. And then they followed him. So they had to follow. Surrendering and leaving their nets is good, but then turning around and following Jesus is the next step. Those guys leave their dad in the boat immediately, that's great. Then they follow Jesus. Accepting Jesus' leadership is moving in the direction that God is calling you to go. So it's about obedience, right? It's about, and that's not a great word we like to use all the time. It kind of has some stigma to it. It's like if you're obeying something, you're kind of like letting go of control, which is totally what it is. But obeying the right things is really what life is about. And we're called to obey God. So there are three things that obedience takes. It must be immediate or it's not obedience, okay? You have to immediately do it. That word immediate was in both of these examples of them following. Immediately they dropped their nets. Immediately they left dad in the boat, right? And they followed. So that's part of obedience, is it being immediate. Secondly, it might be radical at times. Like, again, the guys leaving their dad in the boat, that was a pretty radical move. All four of these guys quit their jobs on the spot. Now, God might not be calling you to quit your job on the spot, but he might be calling you to do something radical, to take a leap of faith, to step out of your comfort zone, to follow him, because by following him, you're releasing your grip of control on your life. But it's actually giving you the best grip you've ever had on your life, because it's God's grip instead of your grip. It might be radical. It might take a risk, but with the risk, there's usually a reward, and the reward is good when it comes to God, because his plan for your life is far better than your plan for your life. And the last thing that obedience is, it's remarkable. For something to be remarkable, it's kind of unusual or better than the norm, better than average. But giving up control in your life can be remarkable, because really giving up control at all goes against that intuition we have inside of us. It's counterintuitive. And so it's remarkable to say, you know what? I'm not just gonna do all this stuff in my life I wanna do. I'm gonna actually ask God, what does he want me to do? How can I live my life for him and not just for myself? Giving up control. Letting that go and picking up what God is calling you to. It's a daily thing. It's a relationship thing. You have to be asking God. You have to know God, and you have to know his word to know where he's calling you to go. So how do we apply this? You might be a Christian, and by the world's definition of Christianity, that means you come to church occasionally. Maybe you have a fish bumper sticker. You try not to swear. And you go to church definitely on Christmas and Easter. That's about it. But that is not what God's calling us to. We're called to not just be a Christian, but a Christ follower. And to be a Christ follower, you have to answer his call. You have to follow him. What does that mean? How do you follow him? It might start with just asking him, hey God, in prayer, I want to follow you. Show me where you want me to go. It might be through relationships, through your small group leaders, your pastor, your other friends that share your beliefs. Like, hey, how's God showing you where to go? Like, how are you following God today? And really, maybe it's answering these questions, right? Are we attached to him? Do you attach yourself to Jesus? Or are you just playing the part on Sundays and Wednesdays, and then outside of this time, you're not attached to him at all, really. He's just kind of there. That's a lot of us, and that might be okay, but I think following Jesus requires more than that. It requires surrender. And so to that, are we surrendered to him? Surrendering is a daily thing, because daily I wander back over to my will and I'm tempted to pick it back up again. And so daily surrender to him. The last question, do you accept his leadership? To accept his leadership, that means you trust him. You trust that his trajectory for your life is a good one and you're on board with it. Some of us, you're like, yeah, God might have a call on my life. He might have a plan. I'm not really interested in his plan. I want to do my plan. We have to work through that. We have to get there. Sometimes we have to bang our head against some walls. That's life. But hopefully we can get to the point where we accept his leadership. So following Jesus is the foundation of what it means to truly be a disciple of him. And following Jesus means giving up control of our lives and giving them to the one who really has the control and who should have the control. And surrendering to him, accepting his leadership, and following Jesus. Let's pray. God, I thank you for your reminder to us to be better followers of you. I pray that you will allow us to let go of the control today and pick up following you the way we're called to. Show us what our specific call is, Lord. Use us. Show us how we can best be there to be your disciple, to bring the good news of salvation to a world that desperately needs it. And it's in your name we pray. Amen.